introduce myself. There might be some new folks here. I am Carrie Faulhaber, Vice President at Jobs First NYC. And for some background, Jobs First with lead partners, the Green City Force, the HOPE program, non-traditional employment for women, and a few other organizations that have joined onto the strategy working group and will be part of the steering committee. And the 4 working groups we've been leading the development of this green economy network for New York City, which is a multi-stakeholder approach to building an inclusive green economy and advancing access to economic opportunity. The mission you see here on the screen, but I will also say it out loud because it is an important one. The Green Economy Network is a collaborative that establishes effective practices and aligns current systems to create green jobs and career paths with priority on access and sustainability. Our vision is a just and sustainable economy in which quality green jobs are accessible to everyone. And again, it's a big vision, but it is critical. And with that, for now, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Megan.
Thanks, Carrie. Hi, everybody. It's really great to be here with all of you today. And to echo what Carrie was sharing previously, we thank you again for your understanding and us moving our in-person session to Zoom. We were really looking forward to seeing many of you in person, but we hope this change will keep us safe and allowed more folks to attend. And at the top of, and I didn't introduce myself. I'm Megan Marshall, Manager Work Solutions at Jobs First NYC. And at the top of each meeting, we like to lift up norms. This is your space for network development. So as I'm echoing Carrie again, please be as involved as you can, be fully present, speak up, raise your hand, shout out, ask for whatever you need. Your honest feedback is deeply appreciated and will make this network better and our collaborative efforts stronger. And for today's goals, we plan to learn about New York City's climate priorities, some projections and plans, economic development assessments of green subsectors, green job growth, and more, and to consider what these mean for our network and the work that we do. Again, as Carrie mentioned, we're going to see some of the network's progress toward an implementation plan, and we hope that will generate some feedback on strategies.
Oh, thank you.
And as part of that feedback,
Folks, can please mute yourself? Even though we love to hear baby coos.
but as part of that feedback on the strategies we're presenting later in the meeting, we'd like you all to think about your organization's, role in the network based on what we're thinking about for the implementation plan moving forward, as well as the open invitation to join the steering committee. And our agenda for today, I'm letting the mic in here, there we go. Our agenda for today, we'll be hearing from 2 presenters on strategies for scaling green jobs in New York City. Carrie's going to introduce them, so I'll hold on that for a moment. And then after that, we'll be hearing that network update around the implementation plan. We'll be hearing from several strategy working group members, and then we'll review action items and we'll close out for the day. Sound like a plan? Awesome. With that, I'm going to toss it right back to Carrie to get our agenda started and introduce our guests for today.
Thank you, Megan. So we have, as Megan said, 2 speakers today to talk about strategies for scaling green jobs in New York City. I'm sure most of you know Sander Dolder, who's been participating in the Green Economy Network and on the strategy working group for over a year now. Sander Dolder is a senior vice president at the New York City Economic Development Corporation, where he designs, builds, and leads efforts to expand the New York City economy by catalyzing emerging sectors, developing innovation ecosystems, and forging public-private partnerships. He currently leads the Smart and Sustainable Cities Department within EDC's Industry Initiatives Division, with a focus on building a 21st century green economy. And Sander and his team have been very involved in Plan NYC, which we'll hear more about today. I'm going to also introduce our second speaker, Joe Chavez, and I think that they might intermingle, so I'm going to introduce them both at the top of the section here. Joe is Deputy Director, Resilient and Efficient Buildings for the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. And he, jumping around here, where he leads the city's effort to drive the built environment to unprecedented decarbonization, energy efficiency, and resiliency standards. He's focused on the development and implementation of buildings-related policies and programs in collaboration with multiple stakeholders to advance the city's climate and environmental justice goals. Joe's been working in energy and sustainability in New York City for the past 13 years, mostly focused on buildings. Prior to his role at the New York City Mayor's Office, Joe served 8 years at the New York City Department of Education, where he led the energy management team in implementing building retrofits and upgrades in public school buildings to reduce energy consumption and GHG emissions and improve the learning environment. Please join me in welcoming Sander and Joe, and I believe I will toss it to Sander first.
Hi, everyone. Actually, I think it might, based on the slides that were shared, it would be better if Joe goes first, just because it's a higher view and my presentation tends to be a little bit deeper into the weeds.
You are absolutely right, Sander. My mistake. We do have
all good.
Joe's slides here and ready to go, so we could switch that around.
All right. Thank you, Carrie, for the introduction. And thank you to the Green Economy Network for having me here to present with you all today. And sorry if my throat and voice are a little raspy. I think the air quality has got to me a bit, so I am might be drinking plenty of water as I'm speaking.
Joe, let me know, do you prefer to run your own slides? I could take this down here.
No, I think this is fine. I'll just let you know when to go to the next slide.
Sounds good.
So as Carrie let you all know, my name's Joe Chavez. I am the Deputy Director for Resilient and Efficient Buildings at the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. I am fairly new in this role. I've been here about 2 months, but have been working for the City of New York for about 8.5 years. Prior to my role here, I was at the Department of Education, where I was doing a lot of work to help the DOE and the school buildings and office buildings meet compliance, especially with Local Law 87. So doing a lot of retro commissioning work and working closely with the School Construction Authority to plan for larger capital upgrades to the school buildings, and very recently planning for electrification of school buildings. Did a lot of solar on school buildings, so a lot of exciting work that was happening at DOE, but I'm very excited to be in this new role at the mayor's office, and doing what I can to really push the policies and strategies forward, so that we can meet our decarbonization goals. Carrie, you could go to the next slide. So the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, we are a diverse team. Everybody in this office is coming from different backgrounds, but all passionate and focused on all of the areas that are intersecting around climate and environmental justice, resiliency, clean energy, clean water, green infrastructure, and really looking to make sure that all of the work that New York City is doing is being done equitably across all of the communities. We realize that climate change has different impacts on different communities and different regions, and not everybody is able to prepare in the same way. And so, we really want to make sure that anything that New York City is doing, that we're looking out for all New Yorkers, because everybody deserves to live in a clean environment, a clean city, and has opportunities to thrive. Next slide. So you may have known this office in past iterations. Previously, it was originally
Thank
started as the
you.
Office of
It is
Long-Term.
Transitioning.
Wow.
Can
It
you
was a big
mute?
night.
Yeah.
Can everybody please
Yeah,
mute
yeah,
your mics?
So,
We sign a contract with him.
So the office started as the Office of Long-Term Planning and Sustainability out of the Bloomberg administration. Under de Blasio became the Office of Climate and Sustainability, and after Sandy, started an Office of Resiliency. So the current administration has combined all of these offices into the Office of Climate and Environmental Justice to streamline our efforts, but also realizing that all of these areas overlap, and so the office is very interdisciplinary, and we're all working together to solve these major problems with the climate and the issues that the city faces, to really drive world leading policies, programs, innovation to improve the lives of New Yorkers. Next slide, Carrie. So getting into some of the workforce issues that our office is looking at, I think a lot of the policies that have been created out of this office and in New York City in the past have really helped to build and spur a green economy in New York City. I see policy as a major driver in workforce demand, especially, in my expertise is buildings and looking at buildings. So, I think originally, like one policy that brought a lot of attention to buildings and building trades and even architecture and engineering firms working with buildings was the Greener Greater Buildings Plan that was passed in 2009, and especially Local Law 87, which required all buildings at the time over 50,000 square feet to do an energy audit of their building. That energy audit had to identify certain retro commissioning measures. So these are like repair and retrofit of existing equipment to basically bring it back up into good working condition in the building. And so buildings had to, both get the audit done and then complete retro commissioning work along with some energy efficiency work in buildings. And then file that with the DOB. And so Local Law 87, really, built, I think, a community and a foundation of green jobs in New York City, that was focused on not just repair of buildings, but also looking towards optimizing building performance, with an eye towards energy efficiency. In 2014, under the de Blasio administration, they passed Local Law 66, which commits New York City to an 80% citywide greenhouse gas reduction by 2050. There were other commitments made around solar capacity in the city. And so, this law also kind of broadened the movement of this green economy. So it wasn't just buildings, but it was looking at across all sectors, transportation, waste, energy generation and transmission. And so that also brought a lot of attention and focus on the need for green jobs in these areas. And I think a lot of the organizations that are working in green jobs kind of were born in this past 10-year period that really coming together around trying to achieve some of these policy initiatives. Recently, the Climate Mobilization Act in 2019 has drawn a renewed focus on buildings, especially with Local Law 97, which requires buildings over 25,000 square feet meet specific emissions reduction targets. And some of these targets, especially in 2030, are going to be pretty challenging for buildings to meet and will require major retrofits and upgrades of building equipment, especially looking towards decarbonization and electrification of buildings. And so, while Local Law 87 was looking to kind of repair, retrofit, and maintain existing equipment, I think Local Law 97 is really going to be about some deeper, bigger work in buildings. And so, there's, now a big focus of how are we going to make sure buildings are able to do that work, and making sure there is a skilled and ready workforce to meet that demand is essential. Carrie, you could go to the next slide. Some of the existing workforce initiatives that have happened already in New York City are the New York City Cool Roofs program. This program has provided training and work experience for installing and upgrading rooftops with reflective coating. People who have participated in this program have received credentials, and it has been a good pathway to jobs in the construction sector. There's also the construction pre-apprenticeship program. This is a pathway to union jobs with unions in New York City, providing hands-on training in the construction skills trades. So this program has also been a pathway to good city jobs, good union jobs, sorry. And we've worked with several organizations that have direct entry agreements with the unions, so that people who are going through this program, will end up in the union and with stable jobs for their future. Finally, the Civilian Climate Corps. This program provided New Yorkers with paid work experience in the green building trades, and was also a great pathway for helping to build employment in the green economy. Next slide, Carrie. So going back to Local Law 97, this is, probably the biggest focus of my portfolio and my role here at the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. This law, again, was passed in 2019, but because of the global pandemic, I think that, we were not able to really focus so much on preparing for the decarbonization efforts that we need to achieve the goals of Local Law 97. But now that we have come out of the global pandemic, and New York is on the rebound, and the first compliance period is coming up, that's in 2024, with the first filing for Local Law 97 required in May of 2025. We are really bringing back a renewed focus on Local Law 97 and trying to make sure that the city, not just buildings, but the entire city, and workforce is a big part of that, are prepared for the amount of work that's going to be needed to help buildings comply with this law. So as I said before, Local Law 97 is going to require a lot deeper work, especially in the 2030 compliance period. And so what we really want to be doing is looking ahead in this next, 5 to 6 year period to make sure that we have all of the resources necessary in the city, so that buildings will be able to start doing this deeper decarbonization work to meet those 2030 goals. The goal is to make this Local Law 97 a success. It's not should not be an initiative that people see as resulting in fines. It's a really a law that is highlighting an opportunity for us to improve our buildings. And, when we decarbonize our buildings, when we electrify our buildings, when we upgrade our buildings, we're also making these buildings healthier and better places for New Yorkers to live and to work. So, I think that there's a lot of opportunity in local law 97. We're anticipating a demand for architects and engineers because, again, a lot of this work is bigger capital projects, boiler upgrades, heating plant transitions from, steam based or gas fired or oil fired boilers, to fully electric systems, to heat pumps. And so that's really going to require architects and engineers to develop drawings and plans for this work. Then there's construction trades who are going to be, working in the building to actually install a lot of this equipment. And then we have to maintain and repair this equipment as well. And that's really critical. So, I think that there's going to be a really big demand for this work. Once buildings really start to plan, there's a lot of financing and funding and incentives coming through for buildings to support this work. And I think once that, building owners start taking advantage of that, they're going to start going to look for companies that can help them do this work. So we really want to make sure that we are looking at workforce development, training, certification programs that are going to be able to help New Yorkers enter this green economy so that we can get the work done for Local Law 97 compliance. Next slide, Carrie. In April of this year on Earth Day, our office released the latest update to Plan NYC, Getting Sustainability Done. Under this iteration of the plan, we are really looking to accelerate an equitable green economy transition to advance climate education, work, entrepreneurship opportunities. Part of this plan is focused on advancing the green workforce development with an emphasis on underserved and environmental justice communities. Next slide, Carrie. Within this plan, there's a specific goal to grow New York City's green workforce. In 2021, a study was done where they estimated about 140,000 jobs in like green jobs in New York City. And we're hoping that, if we can achieve some of the goals of this plan, we can, almost double that number and get to around 230,000 green jobs by 2030 or more. So the plan is really focused on trying to position New York City New Yorkers to, being able to enter the career pathways to take part in this, more robust, larger green economy. There's a lot going on in the energy generation and transmission sector, offshore wind. So, there has never really been jobs for offshore wind on the East Coast because it hasn't existed. And so some of it is trying to look at what are these new jobs and new needs that haven't existed before, and making sure there's training programs to, so that we have New Yorkers who are trained in these jobs and can take these jobs as they arise. Another tenet of the plan was to establish a Green Economy Advisory Council. This council, will undertake some studies looking at the existing landscape of green jobs in New York City, and through some of the insights of this advisory council, this will help us to better understand where resources are needed and what types of programs are needed, so that we can, work with partners across New York City to establish some new pathways, make sure the programs have the resources they need to meet the demand for the expected growth in green jobs. Next slide, Carrie. Another focus of the plan is making sure that New Yorkers in all areas, but especially those where there has been underemployment or less access to good jobs, that we're focused on building jobs and training programs in those areas to make sure that everybody has access to a good job in this growing green economy. So we are really working with a lot of community-based organizations to make sure that we're doing outreach in all communities in New York, and also make sure that there are programs to give access to New Yorkers, training, certification programs, to ultimately ensure that people end up in jobs, at the end of engaging in workforce training programs. Next slide, Carrie. So next steps, again, we've just launched this plan. We're really, trying to engage with a lot of our partners at this point, to understand what the demands are going to be, really looking towards 2030, to see what are the skills, what are the jobs that are going to be needed by 2030, to be able to meet this growing demand, and what do we need to do to make sure that existing organizations have the resources they need to scale, to grow. Are there gaps? Are there training programs that don't exist yet for jobs that we're expecting to see a demand for between now and 2030? How do we start to build those new training programs? So we're really in a phase of outreach, engagement, exploring what's needed, what's necessary to be able to meet these goals. And I think being here and being part of this Green Economy Network is one aspect of that, of many other engagement that we're going to be doing over the next couple of years. And I'm going to turn it over to Sander. Thank you all so much.
Do we want to go right to Sandor, or should we pause for some questions for Joe? Maybe folks, if you want to raise your hand or come off mute if you have a question for Joe, and then we could decide.
Or we can take questions afterwards, Sander and I, maybe both.
Yeah, I leave it to you. Nobody's jumping off mute, so we could move on over to Sander.
All right, does the screen show up?
It does.
Perfect. All right. So this will be thanks, Joe, for sort of laying out the sort of city overall strategy. And my version and my take here will be a little bit of a drill down on the economic opportunities of the green economy. So my name is Sander. I'm with the New York City Economic Development Corporation. As Carrie had mentioned, I work really in a group that's thinking about where we want New York City to be 2 to 5 years from now in terms of industry development. And so we look at where there are gaps, where the city can play a role, and how do we fill those goals. And so the climate space is one that we've been investing in over the years. However, it's always been a little bit of a niche sort of investment. And now in the last 3-4 years, it's really picked up a lot of steam. And there's a lot of buy-in from senior leadership that there's actually a big industry here. But part of it, if you kind of peel back the layers, is there's just not a lot of data on the industry itself. Everyone has a different definition of the industry, different methodologies on how we count green jobs. And so one of the things that we were very strongly considering was, okay, we need to sort of establish a certain standardization when it comes to this, being able to get good data on New York City in order for us to really make the case on where are the areas of growth, where are the gaps, and from a skill set, how do we get there? How do we sort of match our ambitious climate goals with the people that need to do the work? And obviously, given the smog, given that we're all indoors, it's critical that we do it sooner rather than later. So, whereas a lot of industries, there's not necessarily a sense of urgency that you have to train people. In this case, there's not only the economic opportunity, not only sort of like the altruistic good intentions, we good citizens that we need to reduce emissions, but we really need to get moving. And so that means we really need to train people. And so part of what we've been looking at has been that. And so I'll spend like a minute on sort of the broader picture, but then I kind of want to drill down a bit. And keep in mind, all of the numbers and figures that I show are still fluctuating. So I would not, necessarily hold accountable on all of the things that we're doing quite yet. But I'll get into that. So at a very high level, what we did before we got all of this work started in the last 2 years has been really to look at where does New York City play a role? Where do we feel EDC can play a role, given that we manage and own a lot of real estate? We've been very much involved in building a lot of the different sectors in New York over the last decade and a half. And workforce has always been sort of a tied to it, but there are a lot of other agencies involved in that process. So we played a little bit of a role in there. And I think going forward, we are going to play on a role in workforce as it relates to the areas that we focus in on, and climate being one of them. So you will hear from me and my team most likely on this. Before Plan NYC, and a lot of the things in here are in Plan NYC, and Joe had outlined a couple examples of it, but the way I would frame EDC's approach on the space is really in 3 buckets. One is really, we need to think about how we grow the space. So how do we invest in and support entrepreneurs? How do we provide the financing tools that will help address the gaps when companies are growing? How do we figure out changes in policy and procurement and permitting that allows us to move faster, given sort of the timing issues we have? And then on another big piece is, if you compare it to a lot of other areas, New York City just doesn't market our climate brand as well as we could. And so a big part of it is sort of, how do you build alliances with cities that have common climate goals? And there's organizations like C40 that do that from a policy perspective. But we are very interested in thinking, okay, federally, there's all this money coming down the pipeline. There's a lot of interest to grow the space here from a private sector, from a public sector. It happens, a lot of international organizations are looking at the US market. The difference between other sort of times is that if you look at a lot of the federal bills, the industrial policy is quite a bit different. It's a lot more nationalistic. And what that means is there's a resurgence of manufacturing. There's a connection and an incentive to build things in the US, to build the supply chains in the US, and to build a lot of the opportunities here. And part of our thinking is, where does New York City fit in that, right? High cost of living. We should push for some manufacturing, and we're certainly seeing that on our efforts in offshore wind. But what else can we do, and where else do we play? And a lot of it happens to be, we have a giant infrastructure here. We need to decarbonize our buildings. We have an incredibly large square footage of real estate that needs to change. That's 2/3 of our admissions. So we have a market here. We have a ton of talent here. Let's activate it. And so that is part of it. And then the last piece is really around workforce, right? Which is what I'm going to dive into. So for that, we just, as I mentioned previously, we just didn't have a lot of information to use. NYSERDA, the state environmental agency, does have some data at the state level, but it's very focused on energy because that's what their mandate is. And so for us, we wanted to tell the bigger story. And so that's sort of where we engaged over the last year a consultant to help us pull that together and really get the type of data we need that we can not only provide to the New York City community, but also for us to be able to say, okay, what's the demand for electricians in the space? How is that going to grow? How do we upskill? How do we reskill? How do we train the future of these industries? And how do we diversify a lot of these industries, and being able to get data points and saying where we need to focus and how do we stage it? You know, where do we begin? Where do we go after that? And how do we continue? And also, lastly, being able to update that data. And so really thinking about what kind of methodology do we need to put together in order for us to update it on an annual, biannual basis to be able to sort of track how effective we are and where we need to invest next. So with all that said, I'm going to jump a little bit in. And again, it's not finalized data, but I think it's pretty interesting. I'm going to breeze through it. There's a lot of information, but I'm going to certainly be happy to go back and take questions after. So this is just saying that we're already moving on a lot of the things that we've made commitments to. And so I can follow up on that. Okay, so when you're looking, and this kind of ties to some of Joe's slides where we projected numbers on where we're at today, where we're going to be. What you end up seeing is, you know, I would focus less on 2040 because that's almost too speculative. But 2030 is sort of the direction where we're thinking, right? And there's a couple scenarios. You know, there's a scenario where status quo, we don't do anything. There's a scenario where we invest, and there's a really high scenario where everyone doubles down on it. And a lot of what you'll see is, first of all, right now, we're still a relatively small percentage of the New York City economy in terms of green economy jobs, but it's going to grow, and it's going to grow pretty rapidly. But where is it going to grow? And where are really the areas in New York City where you can say in 2030, 5% of the workforce is part of it? And how does that look like? How do we sort of dive into it? Main gist here is it's going to become a bigger part of the economy. That means, you know, there will be more attention to it, and it's going to be a bigger focus for all of us going forward. So when you break down the jobs today in New York City, it sort of looks like this. Roughly a little less than half is around buildings and building retrofit and decarbonization. A good amount, surprisingly, and this was where we hadn't looked as much, is around finance. And it makes sense. New York City has a lot of financial services and consulting services. And so in order to do this, you need experts to really be able to sort of advise on how we need to decarbonize. Waste plays a big role. And then energy is surprisingly a small sliver. However, it's, as you're going to see on the next slide, it's growing rapidly. But a lot of it, I would say, if you look at a lot of these jobs, they're designed for the 21st century. So you don't have, it has certain efficiencies already in it. And so while the job numbers are significant, you know, there is a lot of sort of built-in efficiency on how these numbers are calculated. So when you look at it, and this is, I don't expect anyone to sort of drill down necessarily, but at a high level, you look at things like offshore wind, where the state, federal, and locally, the public sector is investing in, you're going to see a significant growth over the next decade. And part of it is with offshore wind, for instance, it's kind of a bell curve where in 2030, you're going to reach sort of the maximum of jobs, and then it's going to reduce from there. And what that means is a lot of the jobs tend to be more construction, tend to be more, let's build these wind farms. But once they're operational, it tends to be less job dense. Now, from a job perspective, you look at buildings, it's a huge number. The growth rate is pretty steady and not in the 20%. It's more around 4 or 5% annually, but you're looking at 75,000 jobs, and most of them being new, and some of them are sort of like this reskilling, which I'll get to in a second. So anyway, it gives an idea here. It's sort of the breakdown, but I would really say building decarbonization will be likely the biggest area of jobs in New York, but there's some areas that are rapidly growing and we should keep an eye on it, such as green finance, such as the waste and sort of circular economy field. And then certainly in energy, there's a lot of momentum as well. When you look a little bit quickly, before I dive into the job skill side, if you look how we compare to other cities, this is very much from a small company perspective. And so startups, when you look at how much funding goes into it, how many companies are there, we are close to the top. We sort of see ourselves as London being the main competitor for us because we're the most alike in terms of size of the city, in terms of diversity of the economy, in terms of talent. And so, there's still some work to do. There's a lot we can do, but we have some promising areas of strength here. Okay, so I'm going to go through this. I will preface by saying I'm not the biggest expert, but I can give a high level sort of overview on this and sort of try to field questions, but likely can also follow up on questions and ask some of the experts that we're working with on the specifics here, because I know there's a lot of workforce people here, and I want to make sure that I answer your questions correctly. The way we kind of are looking at it is we're going to kind of break it down in terms of green jobs that are, you need sort of the expertise, some of them that are tied to green jobs but are more translational. Then there's a green supporting, which tends to be more, you have salespeople on the team and you have finance people on the team, so work at a company, but not necessarily that's their day-to-day job. And then there's even operational jobs that are tied to it. So I think when you're looking at the green economy, you have to look at it as the full spectrum of positions and sort of how it's going to change. And when you look at the green jobs, the ones that are more going to be new, that are going to be really focused and tailored, those are the ones where it seems to indicate that workforce development organizations need to play a key role. Because that's sort of where the translational of skills to upskilling becomes crucial. And then on the other end, a lot of it is, how do you provide the training to, say, an accountant to be able to operate in a world where the climate transition plays a key role in the operations of a business. So we have to look at all of those and map those out. And so when you look at the breakdown for jobs by type, it sort of breaks down like this, right? Where really the core green jobs, new ones, it's a relatively small piece. What ends up happening is a lot of the jobs are it's kind of a horizontal, everyone's going to have to adapt and learn and get more skills in the climate space and the green economy, because that's how we're going to be able to really achieve our carbon goals. And so when we kind of break it down, you know, it's really in terms of there's skills itself, right? Upskilling, reskilling. There's an emphasis on growth where we need to create new companies and we need to build the pipeline from K through 12 through the CUNY system. How do we sort of grow the talent of tomorrow? And then we need to always keep an eye out on how does this compare to the demographics in New York City? Are we balanced? Are we following the kind of diversity aspirations that we should have, and trying to balance it out and try to avoid our mistakes from building the tech sector here, where we didn't take that at its core. And so when we're looking at sort of the positions themselves, this is sort of how it apologies, my daughter's roaming around, the school is off, so I'm getting a little distracted here. But when we look at it, this gives an overview of sort of the positions, right? And sort of where some of these focuses will be from, again, new jobs, where we need to reskill, and sort of where there are gaps in terms of diversity, and how we should think about it. And so generally how we've been looking at this and approaching it is really take a very data approach, because again, that's something that we didn't historically have as much, to really kind of get a picture of what things will look like. And so this is just, I can share that back later, but I want to quickly wrap it up because I know there's probably, yeah, I'm running a little over. When we look, for instance, well, HVAC mechanics and installers, you know, you need to sort of understand like all the key pieces of the job, the core skills, the core things you need to know, what programs already exist, where they're currently funding at the federal, state, at the local level, and sort of break it down, and really kind of dive into the pathways, right? And what the pathways would look like will be, okay, how do we get to this position, right? As an HVAC mechanic, what's needed for that? But then, and more importantly, how can we create stages where you can go from being an HVAC mechanic to the project manager to growing your career into different positions. So using one as a stepping stone for the next position, And so that's sort of where we're headed. We want to build those connections. We want to think about how that is going to work. And lastly, you know, again, I think it's important to sort of measure where, from a diversity standpoint, we stand in all these positions, and trying to make sure that we trying to balance it as much as possible to reflect the New York City population. And so the process over the next, to sort of end it, the process that we're going to go through over the next couple months will be the study, and some of the data I showed right now is the type of things we're going to get finalized by the end of this month. Initially, we were going to just release a study, but now we are going to tie it to an action plan, and before we actually release a study. And this is an opportunity where we would love to engage this group. We would love to sort of tap you into the process. And what will happen between now and September, which is where we anticipate releasing all of this, is to do a series of engagements, right? We'll have this detailed data, but we want to engage the groups that know how to build these programs the best. And so that's an opportunity, and that's where I can make sure that I pass on anyone who's interested to the group putting the study together. And, you know, and I'm sort of quasi involved, but I tend to have many roles for better or for worse. And so I'll stop there. There's a lot. Hopefully some of it's interesting. And yeah, thank you for having me here.
It's all really interesting. And thank you, Sander and Joe, for pulling that together. There was a question in chat earlier, and I just want to make sure, Mike Conway, if you want to come off mute and ask that question, and Andre, I see your hand is raised. So Mike, I'll give you the opportunity first. And I think it was maybe for Joe.
Yeah, hey everybody. Thanks for a great presentation so far. Yeah, my question was around the technology kind of connection to decarbonization in buildings specifically, but really across, renewables and many of those, actually some of the higher job potential sectors. But I just didn't hear you or Joe sort of focus on the technology related workforce needs. Is that something you've considered, or is it more the traditional construction roles?
And by technology, are you talking about like clean tech innovation? So this would be like new building technologies and trying to develop those and bring them to market?
Well, even more immediately, it's systems like building management systems, building automation systems, and just they're essential to meeting local law 97, and it's a workforce that just is struggling. And I say that because I'm from an organization, Stacks and Jewels, and we train towards building automation system technicians. And so really, I just want to try to make sure that that's included. I just see it as so essential to meeting the goals and needs.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe in my broad overview of the different occupations that I was looking at, kind of was expecting the BMS technicians to be part of more of the either like installers where they are installing a new BMS or upgrading a BMS system, or the maintenance, repair, and service side, which is often sometimes provided by either like a Trane or Siemens or someone like that. But I working at the Department of Education, there was a lot of buildings there that were on BMS, and so I do see the need for that, especially as we electrify buildings. A lot of those systems will be tied into a computerized or digital control management system, and so there is a huge need for that, and a focus on that. So I think that I'm not specifically aware of training programs that are focused just on BMS jobs. I don't know, Sander, if that was in any of if that came up in any of your research.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's it needs to be approached from a couple ways, right? It needs to be the financing side of it, right? On it's a question of scaling. I think the technologies are there for the most part. There's always going to be innovation and growth in building efficiency, particularly when you're looking at, say, material science and things like that, where or recycled concrete in buildings and construction. But when it comes to more BMS, I'd say the solutions are often there. So it's a matter of how you scale things and how do you go from how do you support smaller businesses with the scaling efforts? Because oftentimes, Joe mentioned Siemens, they do great work, but they're a giant organization. We want to make sure that also New York City organizations are able to tap into these opportunities. And so what happens is we're looking at different ways to do that, right? We acknowledge like the New York City brand. Being able to say you worked with the city of New York carries some weight to a certain extent, can help with business development for these organizations. And so we're exploring, and we have been working and rolling out pilot to scale programs. But I think what that means more broadly is that over the next decade, I would say, slowly but surely, you're going to see a change in how government gets exposed to new innovations, how they procure and scale their technologies. And part of it is to adapt to the rate of innovation. Part of it is to sort of make sure that we incentivize New York City companies to be the recipients and not always sort of these large corporates. And so there are a lot of ways there, and I'm happy to follow up. I mean, the innovation stuff is sort of my area of expertise, so I could certainly go on for days on that front. So maybe we connect separately.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Because just a quick follow-up is to both is that, we have high school programs, and one of our high school programs is involved in working with some New York-based companies. And but we've had to go to Chicago Public Schools Office of Facilities, and they've given us controlled access to real-time data from several buildings. And so then we're training our New York City public high school students to do like fault detection and diagnostic work on these buildings. But they're Chicago public school buildings. So I would love to transition that over and use that model with New York City public high school students in New York City public high schools or city buildings. I think there's a huge opportunity for workforce development and for addressing the needs of those buildings.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Hi.
Okay, so Andre, yeah.
Hi, Carrie. Thank you so much. This is somewhat related. Thank you so much. What a comprehensive presentation that was, both on the higher end, but also on the more specificity around developing New York as a center, but also workforce development. And this is really to the last question that Mike answered, but we have the Department of Education, and it's lots of work going on around computer science and STEM, etc. And I'm trying to figure out, or hoping, the sort of pipeline that you all are thinking about in terms of those jobs and jobs opportunities. Some of them are making sure our young people at high school get it, but also the vocational training, our community college folks. I know there's a big effort going on with Stony Brook and IBM out in Governor's Island. I'm not sure how that's related exactly to this effort in terms of educating our population and also becoming a model for that, really. I mean, if we have the infrastructure and we have the largest education system in the country, I'm just wondering how that's being thought about or coordinated. Thank you.
I can speak a little bit about this, especially in regard to the New York City Department of Education. While I worked there, I was definitely more on the facilities management and maintenance side and less on the curriculum side, but was in touch with the DOE Office of Sustainability, led by Meredith McDermott as the director there. And she was working along with the Office of Career and Technical Education to develop some innovative programs at DOE, one of which was providing solar PV installation training for students that were then in their school buildings, were also receiving a solar installation on the roof of the building. And so it was a good program that was connecting the students to a pathway to solar installation, and then this was happening on their school buildings. And I believe that the programs were also in partnership with the same companies that were doing the installations. And so the students were able to, gain experience directly, through both the classroom training that they were receiving, but then actual like on job site training as well.
And these are great, experiential experiences for young people, and I wouldn't knock that. But I think, to Sandra's point, in terms of like ensuring that there's a pathway for for a career pathway, not just like, because at some point all the solar panels will be installed in New York, and like, what do I do next? So I'm just wondering how that's really, yes, it's the coursework, but also the trajectory of people, making this a career and having a living wage, etc. I wanted to bring that up as it's not just a coursework, right? It's the
No, it's
overall
the
emphasis.
experiential
Yeah.
exposure, right? It should happen. It will hopefully happen. It's, it's always a challenge working across several departments and agencies that have their own budgets and agendas and perspectives. And so EDCs will also help facilitate that process. We hope to be able to do that. That's not, and again, there's a question in the chat about sort of the austerity measures that are put in place in the city. And of course, that's a consideration too, right? Like how much funding do we have for some of these programs? Can we get federal funding for it, for apprenticeship programs, or starting to think in that direction of how do you build real life experience. And so just to kind of give a quick example, for some of these things, we as I mentioned before, I spend a good part of the last decade at EDC really working on more on the innovation side. So supporting startups and growth of companies in the space, building facilities that support that. But part of it, we did run a program with an innovation hub called New Lab that worked with high schools in South Brooklyn. It was called the HEAT program. I can follow up with sort of the specifics, but the idea was to expose high school students to technology, to technologies that address challenges that the world faces, and sort of have them also pitch their own ideas. And really, I think for one of the things is real life exposure. Two is framing them in a different way of thinking in terms of building companies and thinking about how you work together as a team. But three is really sort of and this is to me something that I would love to figure out, is the mentoring, right? How do you sort of assign people who are already in the field, have already been doing this with the future talent, and helping them sort of show them paths of how to do it and where to go, and connecting them with people. I think that's a really valuable thing that we've done some of these kind of programs in tech more broadly and in life sciences, and we would love to do that here as well.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you both.
Thanks, Andre. Okay, so Steve, Brian, we're against time in two ways. Sandra's got to leave, and we have other things on our agenda. So Steve, you put something in chat, and Brian, do you want to say your question? And maybe we could put these both out there. Oh, Brian did too. So Steve, to Joe, you spoke about the importance of the city having partnerships with education and workforce partners to effectively address the portfolio policies. As nonprofit with programs ranging from youth through professionals, Steve was curious as to how they could raise their visibility and pursue a partnership with the city. And Brian, what are the plans of NYC EDC and MOCEDG to increase support for nonprofits or redistribute funding? So similar questions here, I guess. So the nonprofits that are bearing the brunt of workforce development are on an even level with resources that the DOE is planning on providing to the New York City teachers and students.
So I think this is something that, we are looking into at this point, and there is some funding coming in from the federal government through the IRA. There's also, potentially funding at the state level. So I think what we're trying to do at this point is understand, where is the highest need for specific resources? What do we need now? What can we plan for? And what specific types of resources are needed? It's not always the easiest thing for the city to provide direct funding to certain programs, but maybe it's about how do we connect programs to existing funding resources that are out there. So I think, we are currently, trying to explore what resources are available and where they're needed. And hopefully, we will be able to be that conduit that connects organizations to resources to help them grow, to gain more visibility, to take part in some of these bigger city initiatives. Sandra, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I it's always a balancing act, and I think that is, I mean, look, the numbers show that the majority of the jobs will be, and this is sort of how we frame it right now, is that there's a reskilling, upskilling, which is going to be really, I think, a lot of it around workforce development organizations filling that gap. Then how you grow talent is going to be another sort of balancing act. And then how you bring new companies here or existing companies here to New York and make sure they employ New Yorkers is even another thing. So it's really a balancing act. I can't see a world where there wouldn't be a balance there just because of what the needs are in the industry. And of course, unions play a role as well, but that's a little bit of a separate conversation.
All right, thank you both. There's a lot of questions we will aggregate. I have a running list in another document. So please, Sandra and Joe, I hope you'll allow us to send them to you and follow up and get responses. And if either of you are staying on and see something you want to answer in the chat, be my guest. We really appreciate you preparing and presenting a lot of useful information for this group. And many of our guests today and Jobs First want to partner with you in this work.
Great. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, please join me in a round of applause for our speakers. Okay, let me get back to agenda. I think Megan, you are up. Is that right? All right. I'm going to share the deck.
Maybe just hold off on sharing the deck because we're going to switch to the activities chart.
Sounds good.
I think that'll be easier on you over there. Thank you again, Sandra and Joe. That was amazing. Moving to our next section of our agenda. As we mentioned at the top of the meeting, we're going to be covering an update to our implementation plan development. The strategy working group has been working on this implementation plan, as many of you know, and we've gone through some of our past notes, our logic model, and other materials to kind of revise, update, and streamline the 8 implementation strategies that we presented a few months ago. Some of you may recall that. And so we're hoping to present those updates here. And in today's feedback form, there's going to be space to provide your thoughts and feedback and questions you have on these strategies that will help us figure out how to, implement these implementation strategies once they're all finalized. And there'll also be space for you to express interest in helping bring them to fruition. I'm just noting that now because I know we have time constraints here. So if we don't get to everybody's feedback and questions, there is going to be space later today for you to express that. So to go through these strategies, we're going to be hearing from Brian Licata, Jen Mitchell, Sarah and Max from Solar One, as well as Carrie and myself. And we're going to switch to a screen share to an updated implementation activities chart. And we are just going to dive straight in with me and Brian up first. All right, thank you very much. So to start, Brian and I are going to be presenting briefly on strategy 1, which is to develop employer partnerships to increase economic opportunity, understand industry priorities and talent needs, and develop customized training. And I think this strategy is particularly relevant and timely to the presentations and discussion we just had. And I'm going to pass it to Brian to see if you want to kick us off with briefly going over some of the activities and outputs that we've been talking about under this strategy.
So thank you. So basically the first thing that we were really trying to assess is starting point. So even though we've been doing a lot of this work, technically Year one has not started yet until everything has been decided upon, and then we're in action. So the big thing that we wanted to focus on in year one was the focus group with the employers and having a baseline of how many people we're actually putting through our program. Could you scroll down just a little bit, Megan? Okay, so we have some questions that revolve around this that would definitely help us answer some of these questions. We want to be able to gain knowledge of what the employer's needs are, what skills they need, how many people they need to train, and the positions that they're going to have open over the next few years. Those will come out through the employer focus groups. We're planning on holding about 3 employer focus groups, the first being focused in on HVAC companies inside of the green economy. What we can gain from that will be great to let us know how many people they need to train. But on the back end of this, with our proposed outcomes, our group is a little stuck on how many people we want to employ based off of how many people we can put through training programs. And are we talking about training programs that are in addition to the number of people that all the partners inside of Gen are already working with? Or are we including that number? Once we can solidify those things, that will actually help us with numbers. I don't want to say that we're going to put, let's say, 75 people through training right now, but there's no funding for extra training. Or they're counting how many people they're currently putting through training, and that number of 75 balloons to 3,000 in a year. So going from year one into year two, we still want to focus in on more employer partnerships. This is new employer partnerships, not employers that we're already tied into. We want to still focus in on the other sectors. As you can see, that there are a lot of sectors inside of the green economy, and we want to keep growing this. Now, this just keeps happening over a yearly basis. But like I said, our real sticking point is how we're quantifying that number. So is it based off of how many people we're currently working with? But we have to have that number of how many people gain employment. So not just how many we're working with, but how many are going through these training programs. And I think once we can solidify that, it'll allow us to fill in some of these blank boxes that we have.
Thank you, Brian. And there's some questions in there that we're sharing out to the broader group because we want to elicit your feedback and thoughts and suggestions on some of these things that we're working through together as a strategy working group. We would love your insight and expertise on what you think would make sense for kind of baselining those numbers in the first year so we can ensure consistent growth and what we're trying to do with our outcomes over time. And I know we wanted to get some real-time feedback, but I want to not take away from the other members who are presenting. So write down your thoughts if you have them. There'll be space in the feedback form. But for now, I'm going to pass to Jen Mitchell to present strategy 2.
I thank you, Megan, and thank you, Brian. Also, thank you, Joe and Sander. Your presentations were amazing. Hi, everybody. I think when I scrolled through, it looks like I know most people in this group, but for those of you who I don't know, hi, I'm Jennifer Mitchell. I was a founding member of the Green Economy Network when I was at the HOPE program, and 2 months ago, I transitioned to the DOE Fund. And so glad to see the HOPE folks here today, and also glad to be bringing lots of DOE Fund folks and for us at DOE to get really engaged in the Green Economy Network. So I just want to acknowledge that I was asked to step in and present strategy number 2 around policy advocacy because the person was gonna present it couldn't be here today. But it is not, so I'm representing and I'm gonna present about it, but I also saw in the group that people like Anel and Zakia and folks are here who were actually on the policy committee when we did a lot of this work. So Anel and Zakia and anybody else, feel free to jump in. But yeah, so strategy number 2 for the Green Economy Network in our implementation planning is about advocating for where investments are made at both city, state, and federal levels. And this is probably the strategy that, as you can see from the least, you know, as less lines filled out than strategy number one that Brian and Megan just proposed, because we're still fleshing it out. We are still looking for more people to join the policy advocacy working group. But what we do have, and Kerry or Megan, I don't know if you can maybe put it in the chat. We did a whole proposal to the mayoral administration when they first came in, and we presented it to their transition team. And then we had a blog. That's the blog post. If we can put in the chat would be awesome, because I think it's really helpful for people to read. Because what we did in that blog post is we outlined about 7 kind of policy proposals that we were advocating for at a city level. And they ranged, I'm not going to go into them in detail. You can all read it in the blog. And if you guys don't have access to it, I can put it in later. But it was everywhere from like saying, hey, New York City small business services, like when you're focusing on programs, invest more to make them part of like a green workforce development job creation strategy. It's things like saying, and obviously we just even learned more about local law 97, but saying if we tweak this, we can create jobs faster and create better jobs, and obviously at the end of the day, reduce emissions even faster. Talking about like the transition to electric vehicles, and talking about how New York City could really become a leader in green vehicle tech, and if we could train people on how to maintain EVs, it would help people reskill that are currently in transitional vehicle jobs, and also would provide lots of new jobs, things about the climate core, things about resiliency. And so it was a pretty comprehensive list of policy and advocacy proposals. But now here we are, kind of almost a year and a half later, and there's updates that are needed to that. There's more kind of strategic thinking around kind of what does our advocacy look like, because what we really believe is our collective voice will be stronger than the voice of each of us as individual organizations. And so thinking a lot about how we update the proposals we have, what new proposals we want to create, and then how do we really kind of activate our network and activate our voice to advocate for them. So Anel, Zakia, anybody else, if you want to add anything else in, feel welcome to, but that is the strategy implementation number 2 around policy and advocacy. Back to you, Megan.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that thorough overview. And up next, I'm just going to keep passing the mic here. We have Sarah and Max who are going to be presenting strategy number 3.
Hi, everybody. Sarah Pigeon from Solar One, and I'm here with our Workforce Program Director, Max. So strategy 3 is to, sorry, I have to move chat box. Okay. Is to establish replicable, scalable approaches for job seekers to understand and enter quality career paths, including short-term to long-term transition through training or retraining for green careers, while sharing employer pathways between network partners. So I feel like the big takeaway from strategy number 3 is that we really want to help work collaboratively to engage all of our employer partners. And that, I think, can take different forms. So in year 1, we're looking at how do we shift the industry from a focus on like short-term to long-term career development, spreading awareness, like raising awareness of green jobs and the growth of all of these opportunities, particularly in light of the presentation from Joe and Sandra today, and thinking about how now that we are sort of quote unquote post-COVID, that we actually can focus on the implementation of all of these local laws and policies, and that is going to accelerate this career transition. And so Max, maybe you can talk a little bit for year one about the focus group that's being planned.
Yeah, sure. So I am part of the job seeker focus group, and we're really in kind of the data collection phase and really trying to understand where the folks that we're trying to reach, like what is their understanding of what the green economy even is? Does that term resonate with them in any capacity? If so, what path does that bring them down? If not, how can we help them, understand the great work everybody on this call is doing and how it can benefit them? So, one of the tangible outcomes that we hope to have later this year, we are developing a job seeker focus group to help understand young adults, understanding of this whole this sector that we're in, and really leverage the data from responses to, I think, further drive what direction we go. So this is targeted toward 16 to 24-year-olds. And it's everything from, like I said, does the phrase green economy mean anything to you, and gets a little more granular into talking about certain jobs, asking their opinion on if they do or don't fit. And that's kind of where we come into this larger conversation, and something that, a lot of folks at Solar One find themselves saying is, are we trying to put people in green jobs, or are we trying to make all jobs more sustainable and part of this green economy? And we're looking to finalize that focus group and survey tool and send it out this summer.
Very exciting. And I think this also goes back to conversations we've had over and over about the constant need for more baseline information just across the board in general, which is really going to support all of us in our work as individual agencies and organizations. And then in years 2 and 3, I think we're looking at, improving and expanding understanding of the green economy. So taking that data and sort of using that to inform all of our outreach and education for both job seekers and employers, thinking about the career pathways and career maps, and then just contributing overall to understanding how many people we are training and placing in jobs, and maybe sharing data across the network to help all of us understand the landscape better in New York City. And by year 3, hopefully we're really looking at placing folks in living wage green jobs. Not that we are not doing all that already, but seeing that as a wider trend across the board, and continuing to track and share with each other how many people we're training and how many folks are getting into long-term sustainable employment. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Max. I also put the feedback form in the chat a little early, so if you guys are typing out thoughts and ideas and feedback, you can put them there, and we'll put that back in the chat towards the end of the session too. But for now, I'm going to switch us over to strategy number 4, which is to develop ways institutions can better share and receive information with their populations, the network, throughout the network itself and each other. And I'm going to pass it to Chris Collins to briefly review some of those activities and outputs that fall under this strategy.
Sure. Thanks, Megan. Baseline is the word of the day, I think. It was really interesting to see that baseline of 140,000 existing green jobs in Sandra and Joe's presentation. I think back to 2012, 2010 time period with the green collar jobs, the weatherization jobs that were coming, and a lot of funders in New York City, workforce funders, just felt like it never really materialized. So having a growth rate between then and now of 140,000 green jobs that are existing jobs, it's not a bad story to tell. And a projection to grow to 230,000 jobs by 2030 is even better. So a lot of what we've been looking at here to help really sort of streamline job placement is to develop kind of a jobs board website. And we've done some work on that already. Some of you may recall in prior sessions from Forage and Skyhive, their jobs boards. So we want to create a job board that would incorporate some of the aspects of both of those job placement sites, and as well as the work that Kumu's been doing on Systems Map, and then collectively go out and seek funding to develop a really robust jobs board, and to support it and the partners in the network here to make it really robust. So we'll probably focus on some specific industries, much like the city has identified. It seems like buildings and energy are two of the big ones, and that would make sense to reach out to employer partners, get them involved in it, and then eventually expand to other areas as well, like parks and landscaping and food and agriculture and things like that. And so that's sort of what we're thinking of for the activities for year one. Year two would be to start to build further on that. And year three would be to sort of maintain it and grow it and make it as robust as we can. Another piece of it will be communication plans and communication. A job board's only going to be as good as the amount of people that use it. And so there has to be kind of a robust marketing and communications plan that goes along with it to make sure that all of our partners in this group, but also the city and also employer partners are participating in it. So that's sort of what we've been talking about for strategy 4. And I guess I'll pass it back to you, Megan.
Thank you. And I want to underscore something that Chris was saying about it's only as good as the number of people using it. And I think that also goes into like the back end kind of structure and kind of service flow of what we as a network are doing to use these tools to our advantage as we try to make some of these strategies come to life and produce the outcomes that we want. So the jobs board is really exciting, but if we don't have those roles and responsibilities and structures in place, you know, it might not be as effective. So that's something to think about as well as you go into your feedback and thoughts in today's form. But with that, I'll pass it to Carrie to talk about our last strategy, which is strategy number 5.
Thanks, Megan. I think I'm unmuted. Let me just click over to strategy 5. Okay, so strategy 5, you'll see there's probably a little bit more empty space in this one. In meeting with the group, the strategy is about establishing bridge programming and learn and earn or pre-apprenticeship models. A lot of this is tied to increasing numeracy, literacy, digital, and essential skills to make sure more people can get into and be successful in green training and green jobs. And in building out all 5 strategy activities, outputs, and outcomes, like I said, you know, a lot of this one, when we talked about it, things kind of got put in a parking lot because it's thinking through the connections. Part of it's thinking through the connections of the K-12 system to the workforce development system, and how are we making sure that there are clear pathways there for young adults. And then on the other side of it, we talked a lot about this kind of cross network, cross-agency referral, and what are the tools and structures that really need to be in place for assessment and referral to be successful, right? We want like a no wrong door approach, and we want to also really, you know, the best sector strategies and a successful sector network will kind of be sorting the talent for businesses and employers and making better matches and making sure that people who want to enter the green economy understand what the jobs are and that we're aligning skill sets to those jobs. And so a lot of it has to do with, you know, how do we assess people? How do we make sure that we're not tracking people to a training that isn't necessarily the right fit for them? So we talked about in this strategy, expanding learning exposure, building technical skills through different required components, through contextualized instruction, career development, and also making sure the supportive services are in place to make sure people can stay in and succeed in training. And then we talked about that this really includes the HSE programs, and that we need to, again, that word baseline, you know, who is doing training in HSE and within and outside of the green economy, and what might need to be incorporated into HSE bridge programming so that it's contextualized for the green economy. How do you increase folks' numeracy and literacy skills while also giving them exposure to the green economy, right? So they're not kind of like deer in the headlights in a green training. They don't understand terminology or the type of math that might be used in the green economy. And so we talked about a K-12 track with career connected and work-based learning that strengthens the school to career pipeline. And did I leave something out? Identifying and establishing skill development opportunities to ensure that clients obtain needed skills to become and remain gainfully employed. And as you'll see, we are looking to work on outcomes, short and long-term outcomes for this strategy. And so we tap into those of you, I heard today, you know, some people are already working and partnering with high schools. And so please, you know, volunteer to help us build out this strategy if it's an area where you have expertise. Longer term, you know, our goal is to establish best approaches, best practice for partnering and getting more people into the green economy, from young adults to all ages. Did I leave anything out, Megan?
I don't think so. I just want to make sure that we offered the opportunity to help support this. So I'm glad you said that. And we do have a couple minutes if anybody wants to come off mute and share a thought, a question, a suggestion. We have probably time for one or two. And if anybody wants to come off mute, I'll encourage my fellow strategy work group members to help me answer any questions that might come up. I'm just giving time if people are thinking. All right. Looks like we don't have any questions or comments at the moment, but if you need some time to look things over, there in the feedback form, you can read what the strategy is, and you can provide your thoughts there. We're going to be sharing all of that feedback in hopefully our next strategy work group member meeting to go through all of your thoughts and suggestions and to see who we might want to bring into the work. So please express that as well. And on that note of coming into the work to help develop these strategies, we wanted to quickly review the invitation to join the steering committee of the network, as this is kind of the first step in becoming part of the implementation plan development process. And Carrie, I'll give you a few moments to switch over to that screen share. If you could give me an assist.
Am I on the right screen?
I don't see it yet.
Hold on, it's frozen. Let me get the deck back up. The deck is frozen on my other screen, so I'm going to try opening it again.
Thanks for everybody's patience with our technical difficulties today. I can start talking while you look for it, Carrie. But in prior sessions, we've outlined some varying membership levels for the network. And these roles and responsibilities, as I said, will be key in organizing this partnership model to drive the network's implementation plans forward efficiently and effectively. And for anybody who's new, those levels of membership are network leadership, which includes a steering committee, which I'll dive into a little bit deeper on the next slide, as well as an executive committee. Formal network members, as you see here on the slide, those are either folks who lead a working group or participate one as an active collaborative member. Those working groups meet on a monthly basis right now. So there's a little bit more involvement. And then network partners or network participants are folks who engage with the network by attending full network sessions like this one, which happen on more of a quarterly basis, or they consult or engage with the network for a particular purpose. So that's kind of the high level quick overview of those membership categories. And I want to focus in on the steering committee because in emails leading up to this meeting, we included this open invitation we've been mentioning to anybody and everyone involved in the Green Economy Network to step in and join the steering committee. And you can go to the next slide, Carrie. Oh, thank you. By joining the steering committee, you would be stepping into a decision-making leadership role as a voting member of the network. And in the member agreement that Carrie placed in chat, there's a lot more details, but I want to quickly go over some of the roles and responsibilities of being a steering committee member. You would provide the leadership, you would provide guidance, vision, oversight, and offer expertise to make change-making decisions. You would be committing to a year-long membership on the steering committee, dedicating about 4 hours per month on average to the GEN's work. You would align your entity and your work to the goals and strategies of the network wherever possible, work collectively to find funding opportunities and develop proposals, share related data that informs decision-making and learning, and champion the network broadly in New York City and beyond at conferences, events, meetings, etc. And then the executive committee members will hold titles, as chair, vice chair, and so on, and those will be elected by a majority vote, and they will come out of those who opt in to be a steering committee member. So once we get that figured out, we'll move to the next steps of moving to that vote. So I just wanted to quickly go through that. There's more details in the member agreement. We requested folks who are interested in signing up for the steering committee to do so before today's session, or to bring your questions if you had them today's session. So we've dropped the link in chat again. We're going to extend our deadline to June 16th for anybody who didn't receive that email or didn't have time to. And once we've compiled that list of people interested in joining, we'll update the broader network and follow up with the next steps. But we do want to take a moment to see if there was anybody who brought questions about the steering committee member agreement to this meeting that we could address, so you could get your form signed and back to us by June 16th. Nope. Carrie, Jen, or Chris, or Brian, those are our steering committee members thus far. Do you have anything you want to add that I missed that you want folks to know?
No, I was just going to actually ask who has signed the agreement so far, and encourage everybody to sign the agreement, because I think it's a really unique opportunity to be involved in a leadership capacity around the Green Economy Network, which is, I think the Green Economy Network is really touching on issues that are so critical and important to New York City at this time. So encourage everybody who's been involved in the Green Economy Network for the past couple of years to join us in a leadership role. It's the only way to make it sustainable.
Thank you, Jen. Couldn't say it better than that. Any other thoughts to share before we go to the next phase of our agenda?
I just want to reiterate, I'm sure Megan, you said this, but if you have any questions or concerns about signing the document and would like Megan and I to schedule time to meet with you and or leadership at your organization to talk about what the Green Economy Network is, the goals and strategies of the Green Economy Network, just shoot us an email. And we are very happy to set up time to make sure that every organization leader knows that it's an inclusive group. It's making things happen. We're driving change in New York City. And as Jen said, if your leadership and your thought partnership is what is necessary to make it successful and sustainable.
Thank you, Jen and Carrie. Couldn't have said it better. Appreciate that. I'm going to move to some action items and closing for the day. There's a few things that we want to lift up and share with you guys in addition to the steering committee information. But first, I want to say thank you all again for your participation, your contributions today, and special thanks again to our speakers. So our action items for today is to complete the feedback form, which you already have, but we'll drop it again in the chat now. We just went over the steering committee form, so I'm going to restate if you're interested in doing that or would like me and Carrie to meet with you or your team. Submit the form via email before June 16th or reach out to us via email. And my email is in the chat. Thanks, Carrie. Our next full network meeting like this will take place on September 14th. And as Carrie mentioned, we're going to try again to make it in person. So we hope you can all join us. And lastly, we wanted to mention to all of you Jobs First NYC's annual convening series, Adapting to the Future of Work, which you see on me and Carrie's backgrounds here. It's a 2-day event. The first day is on July 18th, and it's a professional development conference made specifically for young adults. So if you have program participants you'd like to send, please invite them, or you can reach out to figure out how you can submit a form to send participants in bulk numbers. The second day is on July 20th, and it's for leaders such as all of you in the workforce development and education space. And you can find information about both of these events via our website, which we will drop in the chat as well. And you can reach out to me with questions about those events too, if you have them. And lastly, we're also hosting, as part of this convening series, a social impact pitch competition where young adults can pitch their ideas for a chance to win cash prizes and mentorship. And the first place prize is $2,000. So we encourage your participants to submit to that, which is also via the link that's in the chat there. So I zipped through those pretty quickly, but please review them. We hope we can see you at all of our events over the summer. And with that, I just want to say thank you again for your time and energy today. And we look forward to seeing you guys all again soon and to the great work that lies ahead. We'll stick around if folks want to talk to us one-on-one. But with that, I gave you back your day. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.